What is your baseline expectation, given all of the surveys and data you've seen, about how this is going to go tomorrow? Could New Hampshire actually deliver an upset?
Well, it could, but I doubt it. I think Nikki Haley wanting a two-person race was not really what she wanted. She really needed a four-person race. She needed Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy to stay in this race because they were pulling votes from Donald Trump. So making this a two-person race, meaning those people who were Ramaswamy and DeSantis supporters, their second choice was always Donald Trump. And so what you've seen is their support moving over to Donald Trump and is expanding that lead that he already had over Nikki Haley.
Well, you put numbers on it here. The latest from UNH, you've been working with CNN, gives Trump 50, Haley 39. A week ago, Trump was at 39, Haley 32. Was that also because of the impact of the Iowa caucuses? People are trying to pick a winner, maybe seeing vulnerability in Nikki Haley coming in third? Or is it those Christie, DeSantis, well, now DeSantis, and of course Ramaswamy voters moving over?
It really was those other voters moving over, because Haley and Christie were essentially fishing for the same voters. Trump has got his voters, and Ramaswamy and DeSantis were in the middle looking for the voters who liked the Trump administration but didn't like the drama of Trump. As Trump has continued on and didn't seem to be being hurt by anything, they were going, why do I want diet Trump when I can get full strength Trump? And when Christie dropped out, his support went largely to Haley, and that's why her numbers came up. And when Ramaswamy dropped out, his support went largely to Trump, and that's why Trump's numbers bumped up. And DeSantis dropping out, I think, is going to go to Trump as well and increase that lead that Trump already had.
Of course, much of this will likely depend on turnout. As we saw in Iowa, turnout was incredibly low. And Joe actually had the chance to speak with the Secretary of State, Mr. Scanlon, earlier today. And this is what he had to say about how many people could show out tomorrow. Take a listen.
I fully expect that there's going to be a good turnout tomorrow, certainly on the Republican side. President Trump has a good, solid base that turns out for him. And the undeclared voters in New Hampshire seem to be motivated to turn out for the Republican primary.
So he's expecting good turnout, 322,000. Is that the kind of number that could get Haley enough of the independent undeclared vote that she would need to actually carry this over the finish line?
It would be really hard for me to see that happen because, first off, undeclared voters turn out at lower rates than do registered Republicans or registered Democrats. They tend not to be as engaged in politics. And also, Haley is really depending on not just those undeclared voters who are really Republicans, but those ones who are maybe truly independent, but they're really Democrats. It's hard enough to get people to come out and vote in their own party's primary, let alone come out and vote in the opposite party's primary. So I think it'd be very challenging for her. Really important to remember that no candidate has ever won the New Hampshire primary without winning the plurality of their party's registered voters. Nobody's ever won on the backs of the independents in New Hampshire.
What's your gut on this turnout idea? A record? I've been walking around Manchester for a couple of days here, and it doesn't have the carnival atmosphere that you expect every 4 years. The networks didn't show up the way they always do. You didn't have a debate. How do you set a record in an environment like that?
I think it's going to be challenging, but the animosity towards Trump is strong, and those people who are voting for Haley are going to be people who largely don't like Trump on the Republican side. They'll show up. The Trump supporters are dying to vote for Trump. They'll show up as well. The question is the undeclareds. Are they going to show up or not? My sense is that they're not going to vote up in high numbers in the Democratic primary to write in Joe Biden. That's kind of not really talked about much at all. And it's going to be hard for them to go out and vote in the Republican primary. It could happen, but I just can't see them voting in the numbers that are needed to make up for Trump's advantage among registered Republicans.
Well, you mentioned the Democratic primary. We can't completely lose sight of the fact that that is also happening tomorrow. Even if President Biden himself is not on the ballot, there is a write-in campaign for him. But we just had Dean Phillips here with us in the studio, and he says he's going to surprise us in New Hampshire. Anything in your data suggest he will?
There's nothing really in my data, but I wouldn't be shocked. Biden is in the low 60s. And Dean Phillips is largely unknown and not particularly liked among Democrats in the state. The question is, can he get enough of those people to show up as a protest vote for Joe Biden? And I think for Biden, the big issue isn't so much if Dean Phillips can win or even do really well. It's going to be a question of what is a victory for Joe Biden? Does he win by enough? So if you look back to 1968, LBJ wins in 68 as a write-in candidate.
Yeah.
But the size of his victory was determined not to be enough. The party's divided, he drops out. That's really the only scenario that I can see. And that determination of whether or not he wins by enough is going to be determined by the press, frankly.
Can I ask quickly, what's enough for Nikki Haley? We talked to Chris Sununu earlier. He's talking a strong second. He wouldn't quantify that for us, Kailey. Could you? What would be a strong enough second to count?
I don't think there is a strong enough second to count. Wow. I think she has to win New Hampshire. If she doesn't win New Hampshire, she doesn't get the momentum that I think is necessary to go down to South Carolina to win in that state, which is still a Trump-leading state. It'll be extremely difficult to see a path for her to be able to continue on without winning New Hampshire.